This is kind of like a marketplace of ideas. The students are going to tell us what they have for thoughts, and now our innovators are going to come up on stage, please, and each have a seat. Some of them work directly with food. You'll meet Fiona. I think you're scheduled to go first, which is exciting. Oh no, it's Al, sorry. And we have others too. So the innovators we invited represent a range of careers that belong to the field of food or engineering or technology. And we invited them here to see if they could help inspire you think a little bit deeper about your projects and to think about different aspects of them. Some of the questions we got were, well, how would you make it profitable? Would it be a not-for-profit thing? Would it be profitable? These are things that you also saw with the artifacts downstairs. Some of them had really successful advertising campaigns, some didn't. So these are all things to think about. And I'm going to give the mic to, actually, we're waiting for our last innovator. I believe he is first. So it's very good that you're coming up here now next to me. Basically, they're going to tell you a few things. Some of them worked on projects that are really recent, some are less recent, but very important innovations for computing and for food as well. So they're going to tell you a little bit about problems they saw and things they were trying to solve with the technologies that they helped be a part of making. So I'm going to give the mic now to Al Alcorn, and he's an engineer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, good morning, buenos dias. Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area, San Francisco, went to high school in San Francisco, got into football in high school, which helped me get into Cal Berkeley, where I got my education as electrical engineering. And then went to Ampex for a year and a half or so, and learned a lot about the technology, specific thing that I wanted to learn about. And then met a team of guys, and one of them had this crazy idea, Nolan Bushnell, to do a thing called video games, which didn't really exist at that time, and it seemed like a lot of fun. But you know, it's important that I did the prep work. I went to college, I wanted to be an electrical engineer. I didn't know what I wanted to build or anything, but I just knew I loved building things, so I got the training. And this company then, Nolan had this idea, we went off and started this video game company, and it was, you got to realize that in those days, television sets, and we got one over there, there was no cable TV, there were no VTRs, there was no microprocessors, and if you're lucky, you had a color TV. And there was nothing you hooked to the antennas on your TV set but an antenna to watch one of 4 channels, much simpler than today. So we thought we could make a TV set into a game and make some money. The motivation was to really make money. In fact, the idea, we had our theme of our company, Nolan had the theme, was innovative leisure. We knew we wanted to make money off of entertainment. We felt in that case that people will pay more for what they want than what they need. And you can always sell people what they want. Sometimes you can't sell them what they need. So that's why we chose to go into stuff that nobody ever needed, and we couldn't make it fast enough. Nolan Bushnell had he went to college at University of Utah, and they were one of the few schools in the country at that time in the late 60s that had a computer that did graphics. In fact, it was a PDP-1, and there's one downstairs, and the Space War game was there. He saw that. He also worked at a amusement arcade in burning pinball machines, so he understood that business, and he was able to put the two together. And I was just the engineer. I thought it was a crazy idea, but heck, he was paying me to do it, so I did it, and it worked. It was the simplest game we could ever think of. It wasn't even supposed to be a good game, but we just did it. We knew the business he wanted to be in, and we had about 20 pinball machines, which was the only kind of our coin-operated thing you could play at that time. So we did that. The machine took off so fast, so quick, we couldn't build enough of these. These are the arcade version. And so we pretty much saturated the market. All the arcades had them. And so we said, well, how to make more money? And then we built a home version. So now we could sell millions of these things to people. And it was really interesting because our competitors in the coin-operated manufacturing world, like Bally and Williams, they got mad at us. They said, people will play the games at home. They won't come to the arcade. I go, yeah, that's why we're making the games. Another thing I want to point out about developing a product or an idea, you can't take no for an answer, okay? You'll see later on, there's a little Pong machine over there, one of the first home Pong machines, and it was a very radical concept. People are used to buying what they normally buy, and no one ever had one of these things before. And so when we got it to work, it was like, I was as astonished as anybody else that we got it to work, the home version, the custom chip and all that. And we went to Sears and Roebuck. Sears is a big retail store back in those days, big building in Chicago. And they took it. They wanted the thing, and the first year it was out, they were the only guys that had it, sold it. That Christmas, before the product came out, or January, we went to the toy fair in New York and showed the product. All the buyers from all the big toy companies came by the toy fair, vice presidents, Macy's, you name it. And we did not sell one of those machines, not one. And that Christmas, we sold about 1 million through Sears. And so just because they all said no didn't mean it was not a good product. But you only got so far to go. So I guess that's what I wanted to point out, that get the education, try something, and don't take no for an answer, and maybe you'll get lucky. You want questions? Or?
Okay. So my name is Fiona Tang, and I previously worked for a company called Food Spotting. It's a mobile app that helps you find good dishes as opposed to good restaurants. So prior to Food Spotting coming along, there were plenty of restaurant review sites, so you could figure out where to go, what the ambience was going to be like, how much everything was going to cost, but nothing to really tell you what to eat when you get there. So the founders of Food Spotting came up with this great idea to figure out what exactly you would recommend when you get to a restaurant. So if you had a good dish, you would just take a quick photo of it, add it into the Food Spotting website or through the mobile app, and then be able to tell people what exactly they should get when they get to a restaurant. So that was 3 years ago, and Food Spotting just got acquired by OpenTable, which I just found out recently is an international company. So it's been very successful, and we had people using the app all over the world, including Mexico, all over the US, and definitely Sydney, where I'm from. And it was a great experience working with a team. I would say that the one thing I learned most about the whole experience is the importance of community and how your users really make a huge difference to how successful your app or your product can be. So building those relationships with the people who use your product and making sure that you're paying attention to them and that they get what they need. A lot of the times, product features and things that are important for the community will start rising up and surfacing from how they use the product. So paying attention to that was really important to the success of the product in general.
Morning, everybody. My name's Sunil Nagaraj. Great to be here and great to see all your presentations. To start with high school, I loved math, I loved chemistry, and pretty soon after high school, I went to college and studied computer science. So I was a programmer through college. Fast forward to a couple of years, and after business school, I started a company that was really fun. It had to do with online dating. As a kid, I was really, really quiet. Used to always just watch people, observe people. Why do they walk the way they walk? Why do they dress the way they walk? And just sort of think about what I could learn about somebody by watching them. So when I started Triangulate, I thought that rather than just watching you, if you shared what TV shows you watch on Hulu, I could learn a little bit about who you are. If you showed me your iPod and what music is on your iPhone, I could learn a little bit more about who you are. And so eventually it became this service where Fiona could connect her Netflix, Hulu, Twitter, Facebook, and I could connect my Hulu, Netflix, Facebook, and Twitter, and it would figure out if we're compatible. And it might not be that just because we watch the same show it's compatible. We would have used statistics, which is another subject I liked a lot in high school, to study happy couples and say that, every time I see a gal that loves watching this show on Hulu, she always ends up with a guy that likes watching Modern Family on Hulu. And there's a really strong predictive power, and that's what we were doing at my company. So it was a really fun experience. It was fun to bring people together in a dating context. Had a few successful matches along the way, and raise some venture capital. So I was in a lot of meetings, just like you were on stage, trying to pitch and ask people, to tell people this is a great idea and you should invest in me, even though I didn't have a lot of traction to show. That was about 2 years ago. Now I work as a VC, so I now decide whether to give people money. I work at Bessemer Venture Partners. It's kind of like that show Shark Tank on ABC, where folks come in literally all day long. I spend 6 or 7 hours in meetings every day where folks come in, really bright, really passionate folks with fun ideas, and we help decide if we should invest. I've invested in several companies, and once we invest, we help them out. We sit on their board. We help them bring in great folks to work on the team. We help them make major decisions. And then, like Fiona mentioned, one day we help to sell the company. So kind of to Al's point about the key lessons, I think statistics, math, computer science, programming, those are things I loved, and that's how I ended up doing what I did.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Tiago Silva. I work for a company called CISCO Systems. I'm an operations coordinator in the disaster response team. A few years ago, I was just a normal network engineer inside CISCO, and I decided to do something to help the world. So basically, try to save the world. And I looked inside CISCO. CISCO is a big corporation for the ones that don't know about it. And I found out that CISCO had a team called the Tactical Operations Team. And the mission of our team is to go into disaster areas, so normally after like a big earthquake, when all the communications have been wiped out, and we provide those communications. So we have solutions, mobile solutions and portable solutions that we take into disaster areas, and we help normally first responders and then the rest of the population to communicate. So when we talk about communications, we talk about voice, we talk about data, about how can people browse the internet, get information, send emails, receive emails, even do video conferencing calls if there is a need for that. So we provide all those capabilities to people after disasters. We have one of our emergency response vehicles outside, and I would like to welcome you to check the vehicle and ask all the questions that you have later on. We are very passionate about the job, and if I can, give you some sort of advice, follow what you like to do, follow your passion, and just don't give up,
Good morning. My name is Rakesh Bharania. I'm actually one of the engineers on the tactical operations team. I got involved in disasters right around the same time where you guys are at, right out of high school. I turned 18. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and there were riots in Los Angeles back in 1992 when I was a high school senior. And I said, there's got to be a way for me as an individual to go help with this problem. And so my life has kind of followed 2 tracks. So on the one track, I've been an engineer, so telecommunications, so networks and satellites and communication systems, radios, all that technology side. I studied that in school. But at the same time, I was taking vacation time away from school to go work in disasters in different places around the world. And this was just something that, my family came to the United States as refugees in 1972 from Idi Amin in East Africa. And so the idea of helping out people who are in a crisis environment has always been part of just my makeup. It's been part of my DNA. And so as I wound up going through college and wound up working at Cisco, eventually I found myself taking vacation time away from Cisco to go help out in disasters in Oklahoma City, and then on September 11th here in the United States and other places. And a few years ago, after Hurricane Katrina, Cisco came up to me and they said, well, do you want to get paid to do what you're taking vacation to go do? And I said, wait a second, you're going to pay me to do what I do for free? Okay, I'm okay with this. And so they brought me onto this team, and I've been here for the last several years, and there are a lot of different aspects because as an engineer, I started off in my school and in technology being that engineer at 2 in the morning working on a computer, programming and writing code. That was how I started off, but you know what? It didn't stay that interesting for me. For me, what became more interesting was how do we actually use technology to go solve real human problems? So I always told my friends that I was a liberal arts person trapped in a sciences major, right? So I had the sciences background, but I was really interested in where it impacted, where it affected society. And so I totally feel that I'm in a really good spot. But so we spend a lot of time not just working on disasters. We've worked in Haiti and Hurricane Sandy and disasters in Brazil and in Australia and Japan and elsewhere. But we're also working with both the government sector, nonprofits, and then this other interesting thing, which is a lot of what you were talking about this morning, and this is a category known as social innovation, right? So social entrepreneurship, where it is a for-profit entity with a social mission. And I think that's a very new and emerging area that is certainly worth looking into, and I think that you have a great opportunity in that space. So again, I'd echo Tiago's words. Come on out, check out the truck, check out our technology, ask us all the questions you want. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. So I'm wondering, we have a few extra minutes right now. What you guys are going to do after these guys get off stage, but not yet, is we want you to go with your teams and explore what these various innovators do. Some of them have tables in this room, like Alcorn there. Fiona has one there, and Sunil has one there. We also have the disaster truck, which is downstairs, and I have a team that I'm bringing down there first because they need to leave early. But since we have about 10 minutes, I was thinking if any of you had specific questions for the innovators that all of you could benefit from the answers from, why don't you ask those questions now? You could ask them questions about what their daily life is like, or what exactly is an engineer? What is a venture capitalist? Because these are points in your presentations for your finals that you're probably going to want to think about. How is this thing going to be profitable or not? Who's my user? How does the inside actually work? You guys talked a lot about the features, but you also have to think a little bit about how it actually works, and you might need to explain that. So does anybody here have any particular questions? Fiona used to work here. She is a marketer. So maybe I'll just describe a little bit about their profession so that you can go to them with some of your questions. Fiona was a marketer here. She was fantastic to work with. I can tell from working with her that she had her eyes on everything. Whenever we had an event, she would know who would need to do what when, and she knew who to introduce to whom, and she just knew how to get the word out about things. So actually, what I'm going to do, since I don't see any questions, is just ask you sort of more about your roles in your current jobs, or what it's like to be an engineer, what it's like to do outreach, what it's like to be a VC. Just really quick 1-minute answers, and a technician. Yeah, why don't you start, Fiona, since I talked you up here. And then you can do Al, and then this way.
Okay. So my background is in marketing. I went to school at Santa Clara University, which is just a short drive away, and studied marketing with a minor in graphic design because I thought I, at that time, wanted to get into advertising. Turns out that I'm a much better communicator, so my jobs have always taken the form of how to talk to people, how to best voice things and position things so that you're approaching them in the best way possible. So my career has always been based in that. And when I was working at the Computer History Museum, my job ranged from publishing magazines that the museum put out to marketing collateral to helping the museum's team run events. So it was very broad, but at the same time, each piece of it was anchored in the whole concept of communicating best with the people who care about your brand. Right now, I have started my own consulting company to do exactly that, to help startups and tech companies with building relationships with their users and people who care about their brand, strengthening those relationships so that say, for instance, if any of you guys really care about the Computer History Museum, you would go back to your friends and your family and tell them how amazing that brand is. So turning people who care about the brand into evangelists. So I'm specializing in that now, but throughout my entire career, it's always been about how best to talk to people.
Yeah, I started out always fixing things, and I was a nerd, techie guy, and a football player. And so I passionate. I said, I want to be an electrical engineer. Now, I really didn't know what that was. I didn't learn what an electrical engineer was until I was my third year in college, and I went and did work part-time at Ampex and discovered I actually liked it a lot. But that might not have happened because they don't teach how to be an engineer in engineering school. They teach the technology, and so you learn that. And so it worked out really well, and I did Atari and a bunch of other companies and touched a bunch of different things. I've been very fortunate. And I guess that's the message I want to convey, is that we live in a world of change. When my parents grew up, it was funny. You got a job like me at Ampex, and that was it. You stayed at that company, you worked as an engineer, you got a pension, you got a gold watch, and that was it. Happy. And all of a sudden, I left this job. My parents were freaked to start a startup company, which nobody did back in '72, and it worked. And then I did some other stuff at Apple, and I built a slot machine company, and a lot of fun. I always had fun doing it. But I guess the one message is you guys are growing up in a world that's changing very fast. And so I've went through about 5 or 6 careers that you would call that in my life, and I think you guys are going to have to go through 10. And so I think preparing yourself for a broad spectrum, especially communication skills, extremely important. I mean, I know some of the great technologists that I've met that have very, very poor communication skills, and you're not going to be that successful if you don't. You have to be able to express yourself. So as much as I hated writing and all that stuff, go for it, because it'll come in handy when you try to tell. So you get a great idea. If you can't sell it or express it to somebody else, and it's not going to help. That's it.
In terms of what I do now in my job as a venture capitalist, I spend 90% of my day thinking about people and thinking about the future. So it's a really, really cool way to spend my time. Tactically, I read a lot of tech news. I go to a lot of tech conferences. It's kind of what I would do anyway. If you said that I no longer have to work for the rest of my life, I would just kind of hang out and nerd out with programmers. I would go to tech things. I would come to the Computer History Museum and just immerse myself in it. It just happens that once in a while, and usually, I'll work on making 1 or 2 investments a year, but I'll meet 1,000 companies this year. So once in a while, we find a company that we really like their technology. They'll start with the pitch just like this, and then we'll decide if we think this is the way the future is going to evolve, and if this is the right set of people to do that. That's how Google, Facebook, every tech company you can think of got started in a similar fashion, where it was a couple of folks, usually engineers, that get together, start coding something, see that they've stumbled upon something great, and it shoots off. Most recently, for at least my firm, Pinterest was an example of that, where we were the Series A investors, and Pinterest was 6 or 7 folks. I know today is about Yelp. We also put the first $6 million into Yelp when it was just 3 people. And last year they went public, and it's a several hundred-person organization. It's the go-to spot to find restaurant reviews and interviews more generally. So anyway, that's what I do, is spend all day learning about new tech and meeting a lot of great people.
So as an operations coordinator, I basically coordinate operations in a proactive way, but also in a reactive way. So proactive way, we want to make sure that all our kits, everything that we have, all our solutions are ready to go. So unfortunately, we don't really get notice when a disaster happens. We don't get a warning, say, like an earthquake is going to happen in 2 hours. It just happens. So we only have, a few minutes, a few hours to respond. So we try to always be ready to that response. Rakesh and myself live on a 4-hour call-out period, so we have 4 hours to be ready. And it's basically a 24/7 job. When it comes to the reactive side of things, we basically gathered the requirements. So let's say we had this big gas pipeline explosion and fire in San Bruno. Maybe some of you heard about it. And we got a call from the law enforcement agencies, and they needed communication. So I had to talk with them, and I had to basically understand what was needed. And then, basically think out of the box, and, in terms of like all the solutions that we have and what we could provide to them to fulfill what were their needs. And it's quite interesting because, as I mentioned before, I have an engineering background as well. So I was an engineer inside CISCO, I have a technical background. And now I'm doing a not so much technical job, But having that technical background, that engineering background helps me to think about the best way to achieve the mission, achieve what's required. So that's very important. Also, when we have teams deployed in the field, because we deploy teams to places like Haiti, Colorado, in New York after the Superstorm Sandy, and I try to be one step ahead of the team. So I try to basically figure out where they're going to stay, what they are going to do there, how are they going to get there, are they going to be safe? So always try to be one step ahead of them. And sometimes I get to deploy as well. So I've been to Haiti, Rakesh and myself drove the emergency response truck that you guys will see outside all the way to Colorado when they were having like the wildfires. 21, 22 hours driving, so a lot of fun, and then we get into like a disaster area, which is not that much fun as well. And then we have to drive back another like 22 hours, which, at the end we're like very tired, but after a few days, you just think, it was great. It's very, very rewarding. So, and I'll be able to answer any questions you guys have later on. Thank you.
We have the coolest job in tech, bar none. We wake up every morning and we think about how to use technology, not just to improve people's quality of life or help them crowdsource something, but honestly, how to help them save lives, how to recover communities that have been affected by a crisis. And that's a pretty powerful mission that really resonates with all of us on the team. And so when we talk about following your passion, following things that you connect with, that's really what we are privileged to be able to go do. For me, as the technology side of it, obviously making sure the technology is ready to go at a moment's notice is part of our job. We spend a lot of time innovating new solutions and new things, so we're always trying to evolve this environment. One of the challenges in emergency response is that it's been always done some other way. It's always been done the way that their father always did it. And so there's a lot of legacy, there's a lot of old school thinking in what we do. And so part of what we have to do, and part of what you were all doing up here, is evangelizing your concept. So we have a concept of how communications ought to work in a disaster. And truthfully, we spend about a good chunk of time, maybe at 40, 50% of our time, working with organizations to help them transform how they do communications. And so, for example, in about a month, Tiago and I will be meeting with the United Nations, helping them evolve how they do things like humanitarian response in Syria, or in Haiti, or in any number of these other areas that you may have heard of, or places like Dadaab, Kenya, which is the world's largest refugee camp, which most people have never even heard of. So there's not a lot of money in what we do. But we are privileged to work for a company that's large enough and makes, and understands that it's not just enough to make a good profit, but to actually have that social component, that what we call corporate social responsibility. That's where we get our funding from. So half of our time we're spent doing technology. The other half of the time I'm working on papers and presentations and going to conferences and teaching classes on how to do this kind of thing. So it really is kind of a blended kind of thing. And what Al said earlier about learning not just the technology side, but the business side and the communication side, I would totally echo those comments because we live that every day.
Thank you so much. Hold on, though. So what's going to happen next is these guys will get off the stage soon so that you can actually talk to them face to face. I think it would be a great idea if you guys could get into your teams, really think back about your presentations a little bit. These guys have heard your presentations now, and they might also have some really good suggestions for you, whether it's engineering, whether it's marketing, whether it's technology, whether it's a social entrepreneurial aspect of your ideas. These are all new things that you might not have been thinking about yet, but we'd really like you to start thinking about them now. And my great pleasure is having the ability to link you guys up with each other.